If you're a big RPG fan like me, chances are high that you already know a lot about the Star Ocean series. You probably played Star Ocean: The Second Story, Star Ocean Till the End of Time, and Star Ocean: The Last Hope. But chances are also high that you haven't played Star Ocean Blue Sphere. This is because Star Ocean Blue Sphere was released on the Game Boy Color exclusively in Japan, and it was never translated or localized for North American or European audiences. According to reports, this was because Enix no longer wanted to publish games for the dying Game Boy Color at the tail end of its life cycle, and they didn't want to devote resources to port the game to the Game Boy Advance, which was new at the time. And even though the title was a lot different than the other Star Ocean games, it's really gone unnoticed and overlooked by the fanbase. In this video, I'm going to explain why that's the case and give you all my thoughts and impressions on Star Ocean Blue Sphere, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Before I dive into all that though, please like this video and subscribe to my channel for more retro gaming content and classic RPG reviews. So you probably noticed that I told you that Star Ocean Blue Sphere wasn't localized or translated, even though I'm clearly including video of the game with English text. So are you calling me a liar? Well, if you were, I guess you're right, because I kind of am. The title was never officially localized, but it was translated in unofficial capacity by the good folks at List Translations, and the footage here comes from that version. As usual, I'll include a link to the patch in the description below if you want to give it a try. Star Ocean Blue Sphere actually served as the direct sequel to Star Ocean: The Second Story for the PlayStation, and takes place 2 years after the events in that one. And this is pretty evident from the get-go because you recruit and play as the same exact characters. When you fire up the game, the squad is searching for Ernest and Opera, who sent out an SOS signal after their ship crashes on a planet called Edifice. As the party goes looking for them though, they're sucked into the atmosphere of the planet and crash land themselves, so they decide to explore on foot. Also, they all hope Claude and Rena will eventually come to rescue them, so you don't start out with either of them. As you get going with the gameplay, you're allowed to choose any party of 3 characters to form your party, but the other 2 characters aren't very important because they'll be AI controlled. I recommend picking Diaz or Ashton as your main character because both are very powerful close combat fighters. Unlike the other Star Ocean games, enemies actually appear on the screen and you get into battle when you run into them. There is movement in combat like all the other games in the series, but it actually plays out much more like a Tales game than a Star Ocean game. And this is because the movement is really confined to a 2-dimensional left-right style rather than the series' traditional 3D approach. Game Boy Color hardware limitations are clearly seen here. To do regular attacks you press A, but you can string together combos if you continue to press A just as you land attacks. It's kind of like Super Mario RPG in this way, and supposedly you can get combos of up to 99 hits if you're good enough. I never was though. Another interesting thing is that the enemies have several health bars that represent different body parts, and this is new for the franchise as well. When you defeat the individual body parts, it disables the enemies in certain ways. For example, some enemies will be unable to perform certain attacks against you when this occurs. I didn't experiment a lot with this though, so I'm not sure the extent to which the encounters change. Items can be used with the select button, and special attacks or spells are used by pressing B button and up, down, left, or right. You also don't gain levels, you instead earn SP, which can be used on skills. It works almost exactly like the skill system in the first few Star Ocean games. And I have to say, this truly was the fun part of the experience. It was the single thing that made me feel like I was playing a Star Ocean game. There's a big variety of skills here too, with 4 overarching skill types: combat, sensibility, knowledge, and technical. Spending skill points in certain areas also unlocks new branches of skills, and it's super fun to tailor your character to grow them the way you want. One thing to note though is that the SP is actually pooled among all 3 characters instead of being earned individually, so I would spend most of them on the character you plan to play in combat the most. This framework also plays into the special attack system too. This is because new special attacks and spells are learned by leveling certain combinations of skills, where each special attack has specific prerequisites. And there's actually a fair variety here. I was impressed by the sheer number of spells for the spellcasters especially. One interesting fact too is that each of the characters have unique map-only abilities that differentiate them from each other. For instance, Noel is able to use an enemy analysis power that gives you intel about enemies you find in the wild. Ashton can breathe fire from a distance, and Diaz can dash, which was extremely useful in getting around from place to place quickly. There doesn't seem to be a world map of any kind though, so you'll definitely have to do a lot of guess and check exploration along the way. As far as the soundtrack goes, Motoi Sakuraba gave us one of the greatest soundtracks that ever existed on the Game Boy Color with Star Ocean Blue Sphere. And man, the sound quality of the hardware is rough, but his trademark style still manages to shine through. He certainly did a lot with the hurdles here. I especially enjoyed the main theme Star Ocean Forever, the battle song called Hand to Hand, and a tune called The Surface of the Blue Sphere that plays toward the beginning of the game. The downside is that there's only 29 tracks, which is a bit disappointing considering the length of the game, but I guess they needed all that extra space to pack in the enormous amount of content this game has. So it's definitely a respectable contribution as far as Game Boy Color soundtracks go, but the quality of the sound itself doesn't hold up at all, and I'd never listen to it on its own like I would for games on the PlayStation or even the SNES at times. And speaking of all the content, the length of this game is really something incredible for the platform. A complete playthrough will take you over 20 hours, which is almost unheard of when it comes to Game Boy Color standards. I have to admit I found most of the game very easy though. There were some hard-hitting enemies that you have to dodge a lot of attacks from, but a lot of it comes down to button mashing and stringing together combos that don't even allow your adversaries the chance to hit you. Unfortunately for us Star Ocean freaks, I don't think that Star Ocean Blue Sphere meets the expectations that fans had for it. Tri-Ace tried to pack a grandiose experience into a cartridge that really couldn't handle everything they wanted it to do. It's honestly kind of crazy how much content they crammed into this game, considering it was on the Game Boy Color, and the graphics and sound are far beyond almost everything you can find on the system. I thought the skills system and exploration is a lot of fun, but the gameplay just isn't as enjoyable as the other games in the series. It really gets monotonous at times. So if you're a Star Ocean purist, I think you'll like Blue Sphere more than most, but people that don't like it as much can probably leave this one fade into the shadows of RPG obscurity. But I would like to hear from you. How do you think Star Ocean Blue Sphere compares to the other Star Ocean games? Let me know in a comment below. Please like, subscribe, and click that bell for more retro gaming content. I'd also like to give a big shout out to my Patreon patrons and YouTube members because you guys are awesome. If you want early access to the videos I produce and other perks like they receive, please consider supporting the channel by becoming a Patreon patron or via the YouTube Join feature.